the fourth point I would want to make is that in addition to all of these things that have to be dealt with, we are proposing, as I said, the approvals process, the sorting out of this new incentives regime, and of course, focusing on large enterprises. All of these combined are part of what will help to drive economic growth on a more aggressive basis. It is our view that we still need to return to modest forms of stimulus. The leader has publicly stated that we should have a reversal of the decision to increase transfer taxes and stamp duties. And that is the position that I support. I would also support the reconsideration of the decision to reimpose a 15% tax on dividends. We believe that that was a wrong decision because it directly attacks money that would otherwise be used for expansion in business. And the third area that we would urge the government to reconsider is the question of the proposed closing down of the junior stock exchange. We believe that is a retrograde step because the junior stock exchange represents a very dynamic opportunity to raise money from equity which abides in the country. There is equity in this country. But the problem is that the equity is either sitting down dormant in accounts or is exported to other countries, and then everybody relies on debt and expensive debt in some cases. So we believe that the junior stock exchange is a very, very serious error that the government is making. The final issue I wish to make just a few comments on is the question of bank charges. And that has, of course, been further highlighted in recent days in the press, and in particular in a letter to the editor that was published over the weekend that I observed. And I think it is important that as an opposition we comment on this issue, because we are seeing opinions coming from various quarters, and the question has been brought first into light by Mr. Fitzjackson bringing a motion to Parliament. I do wish to point out that some weeks before he brought that motion to Parliament, I had made, in fact, a speech that was broadcast in which I brought out that issue and stated my concern about it. Equally, there is a history to this. After the first debt exchange was implemented, I had reason to want to find out what was the state of bank charges, because certain complaints were reaching me when I was minister. And I directed that, and in fact at that time, the European Union, at that time, they were carrying out very, very critical investigations into bank charges in the Eurozone. I asked the governor of the Bank of Jamaica to carry out a study on bank charges. And that is the study to which I think is now being referred by several people, which was published in December of 2010. The conclusion at that time was that bank charges did not appear to be a significant problem in Jamaica's experience when compared with both the region and on an international basis. The issue, of course, however, is that since that time we have seen, it is reported that since 2010, we have seen a 31% increase in bank charges being slapped on the backs of the people of Jamaica. Now, I want to make it clear, first of all, that our objective when we became government was first to reduce interest rates. We were coming out of a financial collapse. We were coming out of a period when high interest rates were the order of the day. In the 1990s, interest rates averaged 53% commercial bank lending rate. And it led to the collapse of the financial sector. We're still waiting on that report. And that report will have to come. But that was at the heart of the collapse of the financial and productive sectors of the economy, people could not survive under those high interest rates. So we had the debt exchange when we were in government. And we did other things like the abolition of stamp duties on the transfer of loans. That assisted in more mobility of loans and therefore more competition of institutions among themselves trying to either keep loans or to attract new loans from the business community. Now, it is important for us to note, I have heard on the media that, and I agree, that commercial banks have to protect their financial integrity. No problem with that. But I have heard a figure used that commercial banks are surviving at a 11% return on investment. I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of those percentages right now. The return on investment rates that I'm looking at, that I have seen, and other experts have advised me, are more right now in the region of 15, 16, 17% is the return on equity. Let me make that clear. The ROE, the return on equity of our major commercial banks right now are more in the form of your 15, 16, and 17% range compared over the last 3 to 4 years or so. Now, of interest is, prior to the debt exchange, so a bit of history is helpful. The 5-year average at least one of the major banks, the 5-year average return on equity up to 2009 was 26%. 26%. And when you look at the numbers, other years of returns on equity were 28%, 30%. Average was 26%. Now, I want to tell you that there are a few countries in the world, with the exception of maybe Dubai or places like that, who are getting those kinds of returns in terms of commercial banking. Okay? And so, when we had the debt exchange and the return on equity came down to the 17 and 18 and 19% region, which is roughly 8 to 10% lower. Interestingly, these rates were now more in line with what their corporate establishments overseas were earning. Okay? Now it's important that we understand that that adjustment coming down, as far as I'm concerned, should not in and of itself see and create a cause now for a wholesale targeting of bank charges as the alternative to earning money from interest. I have noticed that the argument is being put forward that if they can't earn money, if the banks can't earn money from interest, then the banks should go and charge more fees. And I want to say that I'm suggesting to you as an opposition that we can't go down that road. Because what is the traditional role of banking? What is the traditional form and method of banks to make money? It is to lend money. It is to earn money from interest. It is not to go out searching for the different little ways to charge more for people on the pretext in some cases that you're providing more technology. I have not seen much more technology being provided in Jamaica at all. Right? Then we hear another argument. The other argument is, well, there are all these other countries that non-interest income is much higher than in Jamaica as a percentage of the total the total banking picture. Well, guess what? Nobody is taking a look at the fact that those countries with whom we are being compared, the United States, Canada, Barbados, Trinidad, and so on, guess what? Their per capita income is much higher than ours. Their per capita GDP is much higher than ours. And we are now assuming that we must be able to afford the same level of charges as all these other countries. Per capita GDP in the United States, $51,700 US. Canada, $42,000. Barbados, 25,000 US dollars. And of course, they have a corresponding per capita income of Barbados is about $18,000 now in terms of income, but their GDP is 25,000. Trinidad and Tobago, 19,000 US dollars. Antigua and Barbuda, 17,000 US dollars. St. Kitts and Nevis, 16,000 US dollars. St. Vincent, 11,000 US dollars. Jamaica's per capita GDP, 9,000 United States dollars. And our per capita income is at about 5,000 United States dollars. So to compare us now, you have to compare apples with apples. And you have to compare your income of the people and their ability to be supporting these kinds of high charges that are being placed on our backs virtually on a weekly and monthly basis. So as I said, Mr. Leader, as I wrap up, I just want to make that the point that if banks go back to core business, hit the streets, help people to write business plans, and take risks, because everybody takes risks. The customers take risks, and the banks too have to take some level of risk. And start to lend money again, because that's the basis of growth. It is the basis of a market economy. You take risks, you create jobs, you earn revenue, you earn foreign exchange, and you create wealth, you pay more taxes, and you're able to pay more interest to the banks. I believe, quite frankly, and this is something that I would recommend at the appropriate time when the debate comes to Parliament, to debate the present consideration by the Economy and Production Committee concerning the question of bank charges, that I am prepared to discuss with Shadow Cabinet whether we shouldn't be demanding, Leader, that the Bank of Jamaica gets involved in regulating the charges that banks are placing. They should not be able to do it on an arbitrary basis, but it must have rhyme and reason. It must have a good, sound basis on which it is done. And the regulatory work of the Bank of Jamaica ought to be directed in that direction. Thank you very much.